Hello, my name is Robin John, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the highlights from the Chancellor's recent budget. Personal allowances. The Chancellor made good on his promise to increase the personal allowance to £12,500 from next year, and the basic rate tax band goes up to £37,500. There are a number of additional reliefs for business. Two principal ones are there will now be a structures and buildings allowance, in that commercial buildings can be depreciated at 2% per annum, although the writing down rate for plant is reduced from 8% to 6%, so one will to some extent offset the other. The annual investment allowance increases to £1 million until 31 December 2020. Some changes to entrepreneurs relief, which is a very useful relief for business people disposing of their businesses. There's now a 2-year holding period, which has gone up from 1 year. Also, you must have not only 5% of the shares, but also 5% of the profits and 5% of the assets on a winding up. So there are no more funny shares, LIBOR-linked preference shares and so on, to give somebody a 5% interest in the company for entrepreneurs relief when he doesn't genuinely have a 5% economic interest in the company. Even if you don't qualify for entrepreneurs relief, don't forget investors relief, which also gives a capital gains tax rate of 10% in certain circumstances. From the 6th of April 2020, UK residents must pay capital gains tax within 30 days of the disposal of a property. This brings them into line with non-residents. The final period of ownership for principal private residence relief is now reduced to 9 months from 18 months. Not so long ago, it was 3 years. Also, the £40,000 let property relief now only applies if the seller had shared occupancy of the property. This was a very useful relief, and for a property owned by a couple would be another £80,000 of capital gains tax relief. Foreign multinationals in the UK continuing to be targeted by the Chancellor. We already have diverted profits tax. There will be additional taxes on royalties paid to tax haven companies. There is legislation to stop the fragmentation of UK branches. This is where UK businesses are divided between different companies to avoid any of them having a UK branch. There's going to be a turnover tax, currently 2% on certain online businesses. And we also have the base erosion profit shifting provisions, which are now in force, and they are contained in a very succinct 160 pages of legislation for those of you who are interested. Offshore owners of UK property are also under attack. In future, there will be corporation tax for non-resident companies owning UK property. There will be capital gains tax for non-residents owning UK commercial property. This already applies to UK residential property. There is inheritance tax on assets deriving their value from UK property, that is primarily shares in companies that own UK property. And also the ATED tax, the annual tax on enveloped dwellings, increases by another 2.4%. This is a tax that applies to properties owned by non-natural persons, primarily companies, and it starts with properties valued at more than £500,000. Further provisions affecting offshore matters. There's now an automatic penalty for tax that has not been paid on UK matters of 100% unless you have a good reason. And a good reason means advice that is not disqualified, in other words, taken from a person involved in setting up the arrangement. It's now a criminal offence not to pay tax on non-UK income. It's no longer necessary for the revenue to prove that you have been dishonest, and the time limit for offshore matters is now 12 years where you have been careless or negligent. That's an increase from 6 years. Obviously, it's very difficult to foresee the future, but things that could be done with legislation that's already in place are annual tax on envelope dwellings. At the moment, only applies to companies, could apply to individuals. Section 3A of the Inheritance Tax Act, that's the provision which covers potentially exempt transfers, and that says that a transfer to an individual is not subject to inheritance tax, provided the giver survives for 7 years. That could be increased or simply abolished. the VAT threshold, currently £85,000. Many people who are currently just below that £85,000 threshold are providing services to individuals who do not get the VAT back. So having to account for VAT would make a significant difference to their position. Pension reforms is something that's always being talked about. He's put that to one side for now, but you never know, it may get revisited. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.